The stars had always called to humanity, but for 300 years, the galaxy had told them to stay home. Admiral Kate Simmons stood on the bridge of her ship, the USS Horizon, and stared out at the endless darkness of space. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her brown hair and lines around her eyes from decades of squinting at tactical displays. She had spent her entire adult life in the fleet, and she had never once been allowed to venture beyond the invisible wall that surrounded human space. The wall had a name. They called it the quarantine zone. 3 centuries ago, when humanity first discovered faster-than-light travel and burst out into the galaxy, they had been so excited. They thought they would find friends among the stars. They thought they would join a community of intelligent species and share knowledge and culture and dreams. Instead, they found fear. The Galactic Concord was a union of 12 alien species who had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. They had laws and traditions and a council that governed their interactions. And when they encountered humans for the first time, they were horrified. Earth, they declared, was a death world. Kate had heard the reasons so many times that she could recite them in her sleep. Earth's gravity was crushing compared to most inhabited planets. Its atmosphere contained dangerous levels of oxygen, a gas that most species consider corrosive. Its weather systems were violent and unpredictable. Its oceans were filled with salt. And worst of all, Earth was crawling with predators, including the most terrifying predator of all, humanity itself. Humans were persistent hunters. Their ancestors had chased prey across the African savanna until the animals collapsed from exhaustion. They could eat foods that would poison other species. They could survive injuries that would kill anyone else. They healed from wounds that should have been fatal. Their immune systems were constantly at war with microscopic invaders, making their very bodies a battlefield. To the delicate, peaceful species of the Concord, humans were monsters. So they drew a line around Earth's solar system and told humanity to stay inside. No human ships beyond the border. No human colonies on other worlds. No human contact with Concord species except through carefully controlled diplomatic channels. For 300 years, humanity had obeyed. They had built their fleet and explored their own system and waited, always waited, for the day when the galaxy might change its mind. That day had never come. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Danny Cruz from his station at the sensor console. He was young, barely 30, with dark hair and eager eyes. "I'm tracking a Veluxy trade convoy at the edge of our sensor range. They're changing course." Kate nodded without surprise. "Let me guess. They're adding hours to their journey just to stay away from us." "6 hours, ma'am. Maybe 7. She sighed and turned away from the viewport. The Veluxy were a species that looked like floating gas bags, their bodies filled with lighter-than-air chemicals that let them drift through the thick atmospheres of their home worlds. They were merchants and traders, peaceful to the point of cowardice, and they were absolutely terrified of humans. Commander Nate Bishop, her executive officer, looked up from his own console. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a calm face that rarely showed emotion. "The quarterly diplomatic report came in while you were resting, Admiral. Ambassador Reyes says the Concord rejected our petition again." "Which petition?" "Observer status at the Assembly. They cited unacceptable biological risk factors." Nate's voice was flat, but Kate could hear the frustration underneath. "Same answer they've given us for the last 50 years. Kate walked to her command chair and sat down heavily. Around her, the bridge crew went about their duties in silence. They had all heard the news before. They were all used to disappointment. The Horizon was one of 12 ships in Earth's outer fleet, the vessels tasked with patrolling the edge of the quarantine zone. It was good duty, in theory. The ships were well maintained. The crews were professional, and there was always something to do. But there was also a sense of futility that hung over everything. They were guards watching a prison wall, and the prisoners were their own people. Ensign Maria Santos sat at the communication station, her fingers moving across her console as she monitored the endless chatter of the galaxy. She was small and quiet, with black hair pulled back in a tight bun, and she had a gift for languages that had made her invaluable to the fleet. She could understand 6 Concord languages without translation software, a skill that most humans never bothered to develop. "Anything interesting out there?" Kate asked her. Maria shook her head. "The usual traffic. Trade negotiations between the Cathari and the Doran. A scientific expedition heading to the Outer Rim. Nothing that concerns us. Nothing ever concerned them." That was the problem. Kate closed her eyes for a moment, letting the quiet hum of the ship wash over her. She had joined the fleet because she wanted to explore. She wanted to see alien worlds and meet alien people and learn things that no human had ever known. Instead, she had spent 30 years flying in circles, watching other species live the life she had dreamed of. But she was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. The Concord wanted humanity contained, and humanity had chosen to comply rather than risk a war they might not win. It was the sensible choice, the mature choice, the choice that kept everyone safe. She hated it. "Admiral." Maria's voice was suddenly sharp, cutting through Kate's thoughts. "I'm picking up a distress signal. It's on the Concord emergency frequency." Kate's eyes snapped open. "Source?" Maria's fingers flew across her console, her face growing pale as she read the data. "It's coming from the Cathari homeworld. Keth Prime." She looked up, and Kate saw fear in her eyes. "Ma'am, it's a planetary distress call. Something called the Swarm has breached their orbital defenses. They're requesting immediate assistance from all Concord vessels." The bridge went silent. The Cathari were one of the oldest species in the Concord. They were crystalline beings, beautiful and fragile, with bodies that sang with harmonic frequencies when they spoke. Their civilization was ancient and cultured, and they had never known war. They had no weapons, no military, no concept of violence as anything other than a historical curiosity. And now something was attacking their homeworld. Kate stood slowly, her mind racing. Keth Prime was outside the quarantine zone. It was forbidden space, territory where no human ship was allowed to travel. If she took her fleet there, she would be breaking every law the Concord had ever imposed on humanity. But 14 billion Cathari lived on that planet. "Danny," she said quietly, "how far are we from Keth Prime?" The young lieutenant checked his console. 40 hours at maximum speed, Admiral. 40 hours. Less than 2 days. Kate looked around at her crew, seeing the same conflict on every face. They all knew what she was thinking. They all knew what it would mean. "Get me a secure channel to the rest of the fleet," she said, "and start plotting a course. I want options." She did not say what those options were for. She did not need to. Everyone already knew. The conference room aboard the Horizon was designed to hold 20 people comfortably. Tonight, it held only Kate and a wall of screens, showing the faces of every captain in the outer fleet. They had been talking for 3 hours, and they were no closer to agreement. "This is madness," said Admiral Victor Cole. He was an older man, close to retirement, with white hair and a face that had grown soft from too many years behind a desk. His ship, the Endeavor, was the second largest in the fleet, and he had made it clear from the start that he wanted no part of Kate's plan. "We have no authority to cross the quarantine line. If we do this, the Concord will see it as an invasion. They're too busy dying to worry about us," said Captain Ben Torres. He commanded the carrier Valiant, a massive ship that housed 300 fighter craft and their pilots. He was younger than Cole, with dark skin and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Have you seen the latest reports?" The swarm has already destroyed 2 Cathari colony worlds. They ate everything. The buildings, the ships, the people, everything. Kate had seen the reports. She wished she could forget them. The swarm was something new, something terrible. They had come from the galactic rim, from the empty space between galaxies, where no one had ever bothered to look. They were silicon-based organisms, living machines that fed on both organic matter and metal with equal hunger. They had no language, no culture, no apparent intelligence beyond the driving need to consume and reproduce, and they were heading straight for Cath Prime. The Concorde fleet is 18 days away, said Captain Lisa Park. She was a small woman with a calm voice and steady hands, and she commanded the destroyer Resolute with a precision that Kate admired. The Cathari defenses won't last 3. Even if the Concorde wanted to help, they can't get there in time. And we can, Kate said. We're 40 hours out. We could be there before the swarm finishes its assault on the orbital platforms. Cole shook his head. And then what? We fight an enemy we've never seen before, in defense of a species that thinks we're monsters? What happens when the battle is over and the Concorde arrives to find human warships in their space? Then we explain ourselves, Kate said. We tell them we came to help. They won't believe us. They'll think we used the crisis as an excuse to break containment. They'll think we're trying to conquer them. Maybe. Or maybe they'll see that we risked everything to save people who hated us. Kate stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. I've spent my whole life following the rules. I've watched the Concorde treat us like animals, and I've never complained. But I can't watch 14 billion people die when I have the power to help them. I won't. The room was silent for a long moment. Then a new voice spoke up. It was Captain Amy Torres, Ben's younger sister, who commanded the fast attack ship Nighthawk. She was only 35, the youngest captain in the fleet, with the same dark skin as her brother and a reputation for recklessness that made the admirals nervous. I'm in, she said simply. Whatever happens after, I can live with. What I can't live with is doing nothing. Her brother nodded. Valiant stands with the admiral. Resolute as well, said Lisa Park. One by one, the captain spoke. Some were eager, some were reluctant, but in the end, the vote was unanimous. Even Cole, after a long pause, gave his agreement. I think this is a mistake, he said quietly, but I won't let you face it alone. Kate felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she had not realized she was carrying. Thank you. All of you. She turned back to face the screens. We move in 1 hour. Tell your crews to prepare for combat. And tell them, she paused, searching for the right words. Tell them that we're about to do something that matters. For the first time in 300 years. We're going to show the galaxy who we really are. The screens went dark as the captains returned to their ships. Kate stood alone in the conference room, feeling the weight of what she had just done. She had committed 12 ships and 8,000 people to a battle they might not survive, in defense of a species that had spent centuries calling them monsters. If she was wrong, if this went badly, she would be remembered as the admiral who started humanity's first interstellar war. But if she was right, she pushed the thought aside. There was no time for doubt. Now Commander Bishop was waiting for her on the bridge when she returned. He had a cup of coffee in his hand, and he offered it to her without a word. She took it gratefully, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers. The crew is ready, he said. I've briefed the department heads. Everyone knows what we're doing and why. And? What do they think? Nate allowed himself a small smile. They think it's about time, Admiral. They're tired of being the galaxy's prisoners. They want to prove that humanity deserves better. Kate nodded slowly. She understood that feeling. She had felt it herself for 30 years. The horizon hummed around her as the engines powered up to full capacity. Through the viewport, she could see the other ships of the fleet moving into formation, their running lights blinking in the darkness like a constellation of hope. "Set course for Keth Prime," she said. "Maximum speed. Aye, Admiral." Nate's fingers moved across the console. "Course laid in. We'll cross the quarantine line in 6 hours. 6 hours. After 3 centuries, humanity would finally leave its cage. Kate sat down in her command chair and watched the stars begin to move. Somewhere ahead, beyond the invisible wall that had contained her species for so long, billions of lives hung in the balance. They were lives that had never shown humanity any kindness, any respect, any understanding. They were lives that had voted year after year to keep Earth imprisoned. But they were still lives. They were still people, in their own way. And Kate had not joined the fleet to watch people die. "Send a message to Keth Prime," she said. "Let them know we're coming." Maria hesitated. "Admiral, if we announce ourselves, the Concorde will know we've broken containment. They'll have time to prepare a response." "I know." Kate's voice was steady. "Send it anyway. I want the Cathari to know that help is on the way. I want them to have hope." Maria nodded and turned to her console. Kate closed her eyes and listened to the sound of her ship, the gentle vibration of engines pushing against the fabric of space itself. In 40 hours, she would face the swarm. In 40 hours, she would learn whether her decision had been courage or foolishness. But for now, in this moment, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt free. The fleet crossed the quarantine line at 0347 hours. Ship time. No alarms sounded. No Concorde vessels appeared to stop them. The invisible wall that had contained humanity for 3 centuries turned out to be nothing more than a line on a map. A boundary that existed only because everyone agreed to respect it. Kate watched the border pass on the navigation display and felt a strange mixture of triumph and sadness. All those years of waiting and crossing over was as simple as pressing a button. She wondered what other barriers might be just as easy to break. If only someone had the courage to try. But that was a question for another day. Right now, she had a battle to prepare for and a planet to save. The future could wait. The battle lasted for 19 hours. Kate did not sleep. She did not eat. She stood on the bridge of the horizon and commanded her fleet through the longest night of her life, watching her ships fight and bleed and die for a people who had never shown them kindness. And slowly, impossibly, they began to win. The swarm was vast, but it was also stupid. Its organisms attacked in waves, throwing themselves at the human ships in predictable patterns that the tactical computers learned to counter within minutes. The Queen Mind, whatever intelligence guided the swarm's actions, had never encountered prey that fought back with such ferocity. It did not know how to adapt. Humans, on the other hand, had spent their entire evolutionary history adapting. It was what they did best. On the surface of Keth Prime, the first dropships landed in the central square of the capital city. Their doors opened, and human marines poured out into the alien streets, their powered armor humming with energy. Sergeant Rico Delgado led his squad through the chaos, his rifle held ready against his shoulder. He was a big man, broad and muscular, with dark eyes that had seen too much death in training simulations to be shocked by anything real. Around him, the city was burning. Swarm organisms crawled over the crystal towers, eating their way through walls and floors, searching for the Cathari hiding inside. Contact left, called Private Jenny Webb, the youngest member of the squad. She was barely 20, with red hair, and freckles and a talent for violence that her sweet face made it hard to believe. 4 crawlers, maybe 5, coming out of that building. Rico turned and saw them. They were smaller than the ones in orbit, each one about the size of a dog. but their mandibles were sharp enough to cut through steel. They scuttled toward the squad with a speed that would have been terrifying to anyone who had not been trained to fight. "Light them up," Rico said. The squad opened fire. Plasma bolts tore through the crawlers, burning them to ash before they could get within 20 meters. The whole engagement lasted less than 3 seconds. "Keep moving," Rico ordered. "Our objective is the evacuation center 2 blocks north. Intel says there are civilian survivors. They found them huddled in the basement of what had once been a school. 300 Cathari, mostly children and their caretakers, their crystalline bodies dimmed with fear. When the humans entered, they screamed." The translators rendered it as pure terror. Rico understood. To these people, humans were the monsters their parents had warned them about. The dangerous predators from the Deathworld, the creatures too violent and unstable to be allowed in civilized space. He pulled off his helmet and knelt down, making himself as small as possible. One of the young Cathari, a tiny thing no bigger than a human toddler, was staring at him with eyes that reflected his own face. "It's okay," he said softly. The translator turned his words into harmonic frequencies that the Cathari could understand. "We're here to help. We're going to take you somewhere safe." The young one trembled. Then, slowly it moved toward him, its delicate limbs carrying it across the floor. When it reached him, it raised its arms in a gesture that needed no translation. Rico picked it up carefully, feeling how light it was, how fragile. The young Cathari clung to his armored chest, and its body began to hum with a frequency that the translator could not render, but that Rico somehow understood anyway. Trust. "All right, people," he said, his voice rough with an emotion he did not want to name. "Let's get these civilians to the extraction point, and let's make sure nothing touches them on the way." In orbit, the tide had turned decisively. The swarms. Numbers were thinning, its waves growing weaker and less coordinated. The human ships pressed their advantage, pushing deeper into the enemy formation. Hunting the Queen Mind at its center. Captain Lisa Park stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the battle through eyes that burned with exhaustion. Her ship had taken heavy damage protecting a Cathari refugee transport, and half her crew was either dead or injured. But she refused to withdraw. "Those transports make it to the jump point," she had told her crew, "or we go down fighting. No third option." They had cheered her. Even the wounded ones, lying in the medical bay with injuries that would have killed anyone from a lesser species. They had cheered because they were human, and humans did not give up. The Queen Mind sensed defeat. In its alien way, it understood that the battle was lost, that the prey had proven too strong, that the feast it had anticipated was slipping away. And so it made a decision that was not quite intelligence, but was something close to it. If it could not have the planet, it would make sure no one else could either. The remaining swarm organisms began to converge, pulling back from the human ships and gathering into a single massive wave. They oriented themselves toward the planet's surface, toward the largest Thitari city, the one where millions of civilians were still waiting to be evacuated. Kate saw the movement on her tactical display and felt her blood run cold. "They're going for the capital. They're going to try to kill as many people as possible before we can stop them." Commander Bishop looked at her. "We can't intercept them all. There are too many, and our ships are too spread out." Kate knew he was right. The math was simple and brutal. If they maintained their current formation, they would destroy most of the swarm, but enough would get through to devastate the city. Millions would die. Unless. "All ships, form up on the horizon," she ordered. "We're going to put ourselves between the swarm and that city." The bridge went silent. Everyone understood what she was asking. At that range, with that concentration of fire, the fleet would take catastrophic losses. Some ships would not survive at all. "Ma'am," Danny Cruz said quietly, "if we do this—" "I know." Kate's voice was steady. "I'm not ordering anyone to follow me. This is my choice. But I didn't come here to watch millions of people die because I was afraid for my own life. If you want to pull back, I won't blame you." No one moved. No one spoke. Then, one by one, the ships of the Outer Fleet began to change course. The Valiant, the Resolute, the Endeavor, even Admiral Cole's ship. They formed a line between the swarm and the planet, a wall of metal and fire and human stubbornness. The Queen Mine did not hesitate. It hurled its remaining forces at the human fleet in one final, desperate assault. The swarm hit the line like a tsunami hitting a seawall. Ships shuddered under the impact. Shields failed. Hulls breached. Fire and vacuum claimed lives that Kate had sworn to protect. But they held. The Resolute took a direct hit that tore away half its engineering section. Captain Park died at her post, still giving orders, still fighting. The Endeavor lost its main battery, but kept firing with secondary weapons until there was nothing left to fire. Young pilots and their fighters flew suicide runs into the heart of the swarm. Their last words recorded for families who would never see them again. And when the last swarm organism fell silent, when the Queen Mine finally died with a psychic scream that made every human in the fleet clutch their heads in pain, the line was still there. Battered, broken, but undefeated. Kate sat in her command chair, staring at the tactical display that showed the aftermath of the battle. 3 ships destroyed. 4 more crippled beyond repair. Over 2,000 dead, their bodies drifting in the void or vaporized in the fighting. And below them, 14 billion Catharis still lived. "It's over," Commander Bishop said. His voice was hoarse, and there were tears on his cheeks that he did not bother to hide. "We won." Kate did not feel like she had won anything. She felt empty, hollowed out by the weight of the lives she had spent. But when she looked at the planet below, at the cities that were still standing, at the people who would see another sunrise because of what her fleet had done, she knew that she would make the same choice again. Every time. "Send a message to Keth Prime," she said. "Tell them the swarm is destroyed. Tell them they're safe." She paused, feeling the exhaustion pulling at her bones. "And tell them we're glad we could help." The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and found themselves in the middle of a nightmare. Kate had studied the tactical reports during the long journey. She had watched recordings of the swarm's attacks on the Cathari colony worlds, seen the footage of their ships dissolving under waves of hungry organisms. She thought she had been prepared for what she would find at Keth Prime. She had been wrong. The orbital defense platforms, massive stations that had protected the Cathari homeworld for 10,000 years, were shattered ruins. Their crystalline structures, once beautiful enough to take your breath away, now tumbled through space in broken pieces. Cathari ships drifted among the wreckage, their elegant forms torn open and empty. Their crews gone, and everywhere, there was the swarm. They looked like insects. If insects could grow to the size of buildings. Their bodies were dark and segmented, covered in plates of silicon armor that reflected no light. They moved in clouds, millions of individual organisms acting with a single purpose, a single hunger. And they were descending toward the planet below in a rain of death. "Mother of God," whispered Danny Cruz from his sensor station. His face had gone pale, and his hands were shaking on his console. "Admiral, there are thousands of them. Maybe tens of thousands." Kate forced herself to stay calm. Panic would not help anyone. "Can you identify a command structure? A central organism coordinating the others?" "I'm reading a larger mass near the center of the swarm. Much larger than the others. It might be some kind of queen. Mark it for targeting." Kate turned to face her crew. They were all staring at the view screen, their faces showing the same horror she felt. "Listen to me. I know this looks bad. I know we're outnumbered and outgunned. But those things down there are mindless. They're animals, no matter how big they are. And humans have been killing animals since we climbed down from the trees. She saw some of the fear leave their eyes, replaced by something harder. Something that remembered what humans had once been, before the galaxy told them to be ashamed of their nature. All ships, this is Admiral Simmons. Combat spread, pattern Delta. Carrier group, launch all fighters. Destroyers, target the landing pods heading for the surface. Cruisers with me. We're going to punch a hole right through the center of that swarm and see if we can't make that queen nervous. The fleet moved like a living thing, each ship finding its place in the formation with practiced ease. The Valiant opened its launch bays, and fighter craft poured out into space, their engines burning bright against the darkness. The destroyers split off in pairs, racing toward the streams of swarm organisms falling toward the planet below. Kate watched it all on her tactical display, feeling a fierce pride in her people. They had never fought a real battle before. They had trained for centuries, preparing for a war that everyone hoped would never come. And now, in their first true test, they were performing like veterans. The Horizon led the cruiser group, straight into the heart of the swarm. The first wave of organisms hit them like a living wall. They threw themselves at the human ships, their bodies exploding against energy shields and bursts of green and yellow light. The shields held barely, and the cruisers pushed forward, their weapons firing in continuous streams. Forward batteries, target the larger organisms, Kate ordered. Ignore the small ones unless they get through the shields. The swarm had never encountered anything like human weapons. Their bodies, evolved to consume organic matter and soft metals, had no defense against plasma cannons and railgun slugs. Each shot tore through dozens of organisms, leaving trails of destruction in the darkness, but there were so many of them. For every one that died, 10 more took its place. Above the battle, Lieutenant Commander Amy Torres led her fighter squadron through a storm of chaos. Her ship, small and fast, danced between swarm organisms that snapped at her with mandibles the size of cars. Behind her, her wingmates flew in perfect formation, their movements synchronized by years of training and an instinct that went back to humanity's earliest days as pack hunters. "Splash 12, she reported, her voice calm despite the insanity around her. "Moving to intercept landing wave 7. Someone tell those ground troops they've got incoming." Her brother's voice crackled over the radio. "This is Valiant. We're launching the second wave now. Hold them off for another 3 minutes." "Copy that." 3 minutes. Amy threw her ship into a tight turn, feeling the gravity compensators strain to keep her from being crushed by the force. A human could survive maneuvers that would kill any other species in the galaxy. The Concorde had called that terrifying. Right now, Amy called it an advantage. On the surface of Keth Prime, the Cathari were watching the battle through whatever sensors still functioned. First Speaker Valen stood in the emergency bunker beneath the capital city, surrounded by his advisors, and tried to make sense of what he was seeing. "Those are human ships," said Science Minister Kira, her crystalline body humming with confusion. The symbols on their hulls matched the records from first contact. "That's impossible," Valen said. "The humans are contained. They cannot leave their system. And yet they are here. They are fighting the swarm." Kira paused, her faceted eyes reflecting the images on the screen. "They are dying for us." Valen watched as a human destroyer threw itself between a swarm landing pod and a Cathari refugee transport. The destroyer's shields failed under the impact, and the pod tore into its hull, but the transport escaped. The human ship tumbled away, trailing fire and debris, but still fighting. "Why?" he whispered. "We have given them nothing but contempt. We have kept them caged like animals. Why would they sacrifice themselves for us?" No one had an answer. On the bridge of the Horizon, Kate received a communication request from the planet's surface. She accepted it without hesitation and the view screen flickered to show first speaker Valen's face. He was beautiful, in the way all Cathari were beautiful, his body a symphony of crystal and light. But his eyes were filled with something Kate had never seen in a Concord species before. Gratitude. "Human commander," Valen said, his voice translated by the ship's computers into something Kate could understand. "Why have you come? Your laws forbid you to be here. Your people will be punished for this." Kate smiled, though she knew the expression might mean nothing to an alien species. "First speaker, we came because you needed help. We came because no one else could get here in time. And we came because we believe that when innocent people are dying, the right thing to do is try to save them, regardless of what the laws say." Valen was silent for a long moment. His body hummed with frequencies that the translator could not interpret, emotions too complex for human words. "You are not what we were told," he said finally. "You are not monsters." "No," Kate agreed. "We're just people. Dangerous people, maybe. Scary people, from your perspective. But people nonetheless. And right now, we're people who are going to save your world. With your permission." Valen's body sang a single clear note. The translator rendered it as one word. "Yes." Kate nodded and closed the channel. Around her, the battle raged on, but she felt something shift in the universe. Something that had been broken for 3 centuries had just begun to heal. "All ships," she said. "The Cathari have given us permission to operate in their space. Let's show them what Deathworlders can do." 3 weeks after the battle, Admiral Kate Simmons stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Concord Assembly and tried not to feel small. The chamber was enormous. A dome of living crystal that stretched so high above her that clouds formed near its ceiling. It had been designed to hold representatives of 12 species, each in their own section, with their own atmosphere and gravity and comfort. The Veluxi floated in their gas-filled sphere. The Doran swam in their tank of warm water. The Cathari sat in seats of pure light, their bodies singing with frequencies that filled the air with music. And in the center of it all, on a platform designed for creatures from normal worlds, Kate stood alone. High Arbiter Solon spoke first. He was an ancient Veluxi, his membrane so old that it had turned from blue to silver, and his voice carried the weight of centuries of authority. "Admiral Kate Simmons of the human species," he said, "you stand before this assembly accused of violating the quarantine protocols. You crossed the boundary of human space without authorization. You brought warships into Concord territory. You engaged in combat operations on a Concord world. How do you respond to these charges?" Kate took a breath. She had practiced this moment 100 times, but the words still felt strange on her tongue. "I acknowledge the facts as stated," she said. "My fleet crossed the quarantine line. We entered Concord space. We fought a battle at Keth Prime. All of this is true." A murmur ran through the assembly. Several species shifted in their seats, their body language expressing emotions Kate could not read. "And do you claim justification for these actions?" Solon asked. "I claim necessity." Kate raised her chin and met the High Arbiter's eyes. "When we received a distress call from Keth Prime, the nearest Concord fleet was 18 days away. The swarm would have consumed the planet in 3. We were the only force that could respond in time. So we did, without permission, without authorization, without any legal standing to act. Yes, Kate did not flinch, because 14 billion people were going to die, and the only thing standing between them and extinction was a line on a map. I decided that line was worth less than their lives." The murmur grew louder. Kate could see the representatives exchanging looks, their translators working overtime to keep up with the flood of reactions. First, Speaker Velen rose from the Cathari section. His body had healed since the battle, the cracks in his crystalline form smoothing over with new growth. but he still carried himself with the fragility of someone who had looked death in the face. "High Arbiter," he said. The Cathari wished to make a formal statement. Solon gestured his permission, and the great hall fell silent. Velen turned to face the full assembly, his faceted eyes reflecting the light of 1,000 stars. "For 300 years, he began, my species has supported the quarantine. We believed the humans to be dangerous, unpredictable, violent beyond reason. We were told they were Deathworlders, creatures from a nightmare planet, and we accepted this without question. We were afraid." He paused, his body humming with harmonics that the translator struggled to convey. "We were wrong." The words hung in the air like a struck bell. When the swarm came, the Concorde was too far away to save us. Our own ships were designed for beauty, not war. Our own people had forgotten how to fight. We would have died, all 14 billion of us, if not for the humans. Velen turned to look at Kate, and she saw something in his eyes that she had never expected to see from a Concorde species: respect. They came knowing they would be punished. They came knowing we had treated them with contempt for centuries. They came because it was the right thing to do, because they could not stand by and watch innocent people die. And when the battle was over, when the swarm had been destroyed, their soldiers did not celebrate their victory. His voice cracked with emotion. They wept. They wept for our dead. They wept alongside us, as if our children were their children, our losses their losses. I saw human Marines carrying Cathari young through the burning streets, protecting them with their own bodies, treating them with more gentleness than I would have believed possible from creatures so strong. Velen faced the assembly once more. "The humans are Deathworlders. This is true. They are powerful and dangerous and capable of violence that makes other species tremble. But they are not monsters. They are protectors. They are guardians. And they deserve to take their place among us as equals." He raised his voice, the harmonics ringing through the crystal dome. "The Cathari moved to end the quarantine, permanently. We call upon this assembly to welcome humanity into the Galactic Concorde as full members, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." The chamber erupted. Species that had never agreed on anything began shouting over each other, their translators creating a cacophony of overlapping voices. Kate stood in the center of it all, watching centuries of fear and prejudice collide with the undeniable truth of what had happened at Keth Prime. It took 3 hours for order to be restored. 3 hours of debate and argument and accusations and defenses. Kate stood through all of it, answering questions when asked, remaining silent when silence was wiser. And in the end, when High Arbiter Solon called for the vote, the result was unanimous. The quarantine was over. 6 months later, Kate stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, a newly built structure that hung in space at the exact point where human territory met Concorde space. It was a symbol of the new relationship between humanity and the galaxy, a place where species could meet and learn and grow together. Commander Nate Bishop found her there, as she knew he would. He was carrying 2 cups of coffee, a drink that had become surprisingly popular among Concorde species who wanted to understand human culture. "The Doran ambassador asked me today if it's true that humans used to hunt their own food," he said, handing her a cup. "I told him about deer hunting." He nearly fainted. Kate laughed, a sound that still felt strange after so many years of seriousness. "We're always going to scare them, you know. They might accept us. They might even like us, but they'll never stop being a little bit afraid. Is that so bad?" Nate asked. Kate thought about it. She thought about the Cathari child that Sergeant Delgado had carried through the burning streets, the one who had trusted a monster to save its life. She thought about Captain Park, who had died protecting people she had never met, people who had spent centuries calling her species a threat. She thought about all the humans who had given their lives at Keth Prime, not because they had to, but because they chose to. "No," she said finally. "I don't think it is. Fear isn't the enemy. Fear is just a warning sign. What matters is what you do when you're afraid. You can let it turn you cruel, make you cage what you don't understand, keep you separate from anyone who's different. Or you can push through it, look past it, try to see the truth underneath." She watched through the viewport as a human destroyer and a Kethari crystal ship flew in formation together, their crews working in perfect harmony. The Concorde was afraid of us for 300 years. And for 300 years, we waited. We proved over and over that we could be patient, that we could be peaceful, that we could follow rules we thought were unfair. We earned their trust the slow way. She turned to face Nate, and her eyes were bright with something that might have been hope. But in the end, it wasn't patience that changed their minds. It wasn't following rules or accepting punishment or staying in our cage. It was one moment of courage. One decision to do what was right instead of what was safe. That's what made the difference. Nate nodded slowly. "So, what happens now?" Kate smiled, a real smile, the kind she had almost forgotten how to make. "Now we get to find out what we can really do. Now we get to explore the stars, meet new species, learn new things. Now we get to show the galaxy that the Deathworlders they were so afraid of might just be the best friends they ever had." Outside the viewport, the stars burned bright and cold and infinitely patient. For the first time in 300 years. They were waiting for humanity, and humanity was finally ready to answer.